Sometimes things come to me and it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Well, that's always a good.
Or what did we? I heard this somewhere. I think it was on Twitter. Somebody said, "Yeah, just flip it over. Flip it upside down.
Turn it upside down.
Yeah. Flip it, smack it, rub it down.
Oh no!"
And on that note.
What's architecture really about? Archispeak is a show that dares to peek under the architectural kimono, exposing what architecture really is, what it is that architects really do, and show you why we are passionate about our chosen profession. I'm Evan Troxel. Join Neil Pan, Cormac Phelan, and me as we have a casual conversation about all things architecture, which includes all the stuff people don't talk about. Think you already know what architecture is really about? Tune in to find out. It's time for some Archispeak.
Well, what's the studio environment to you, Evan? What does that mean?
To me, the studio is, obviously that's where all the work happens, right? And so I think something that would be interesting to talk about would be, is it a 24/7 environment? Is it a 9-to-5 environment? Is it cubicles? Is it open? Is there physical modeling? Is it purely digital modeling? Like, what is the modern studio environment versus maybe it's the same thing, the ideal studio environment? Because as architects, we're a creative bunch. And the way that I see it, the studio is becoming more and more of a cubicle environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because we're sort of like that, where we have project managers kind of have a cubicle. It's up against the windows, so we can look out, daydream and, stuff like that. But, then we have an open studio. But the thing is that everybody faces their computers, backs to each other.
Right. Headphones in.
Headphones in.
Yeah.
And
headphones are like the worst thing that's happened to the studio, is what my friend Mark said. The other day, he's like, "Oh, headphones, they've got to be the worst thing that's ever happened to the architecture studio."
I agree, because, you lose that spontaneity of, having the opportunity to, chat with somebody and say, I really like this, or, I've been in studios where, we'll listen to music on the speakers, but nobody will put in headphones. And the spontaneity of the conversation is what to me, sparks inspiration, ideas and things like that. You don't have to tap on their shoulder and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" You actually get a chance to converse with them without, interrupting them, or, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I didn't know you were listening to, Archispeak on your podcast."
Yeah. Well, I think that it's harder to do that nowadays with computer screens, to see what's happening on the screen and say, "Oh, I wanted to ask you about that," because it's not a still image for the most part.
Right.
If there's a model or there's CAD work going on, there's a lot of zooming and panning and, in and out and zipping around this thing, because you're always looking at it from a different angle. Whereas when it was on the board, when it was on the desk, it would be there for a few days.
Yeah.
And you would think about it and you would go away from it. You'd come back to it. And people would walk by and they could look at it and they could study it and they could ask questions about it. It was a lot easier. Same thing goes for physical modeling, right? When you're building a physical model, you're doing it in the open for the most part.
Yeah.
At least that's how it kind of should be, I think. And people have the opportunity to experience it and see it. Either they're in the studio with you or they're walking by and they can say, "Hey, that's cool. What's that?" And I think that's a lot harder now when everything's on a screen.
Well, have you ever had that experience of, well, maybe not, but back when we did hand draft, you like you said, what you would have would be on your desk maybe for a day or 2 days or 3 days, if you're, depending on what you're doing.
Or you'd have a progression.
Ever come into the office when there's like a note there, like, hey, you missed this, or make sure you do that. It's like, well, wait a minute.
Have you thought about this?
Have you thought about this? It's like, wait a minute. Somebody was walking around looking at my drawings laying on my desk, and that can still happen, I guess, if you got a set of check prints or something laying on your desk. But for the most part, you go home at night, you turn the computer off, and whatever you were working on is gone. I mean, or at least can't be reflected on by anyone in the office at that point.
I see people, to me, it's like the tract house mentality, where you drive up to your house, you hit the garage door opener button, you drive in, you hit the garage door closer button, and then you're anonymous in your own neighborhood. And that's kind of how it is in the studio to me, where people come into the office, they beeline straight for their desk, they sit down, they turn on and they get sucked into email, right? First thing in the morning. The most non-creative thing you could possibly do is do email for an hour. And then, you put in your earbuds, you start working away. And it's the same thing as that anonymous driving into your garage thing and not talking to your neighbors. That, to me, is kind of poisonous in the studio environment. It starts to kill off that group sense of, we're all working on these projects together. It's very much a solo act at that point.
I absolutely agree with you, because that's one thing that's commented often by a lot of the new recent graduates that come into the office, and not just our office, but in offices that I've worked in the past as well, that they come in and they're just like, this isn't what I expected. I was assuming that it was going to be this open studio environment like in college, where, everybody sits around a big table and they talk about architecture. Nobody talks about architecture here. And, every so often I'll, get into a conversation with people and talk about a building that we see in, online or in a magazine or something like that. But rarely is there that spontaneous conversation about what it is that keeps us going, and it almost feels soul sucking in a way, because the creativity just feels gone.
It's like that movie Super 8, right, where the alien has abducted all these people, and sorry about the spoilers here, but everybody is staring at the light. They're in this underground cavern and they're just staring at the light, right? And they can't not stare at it. And that, to me, is kind of what these screens have become. It is the hub of all of our communication, all of our information, our source for inspiration. It's all of those things in one, and you can't pry away from it, except if you have to go grab a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom. Luckily, in our office, the bathrooms are nowhere near our workstations. So at least you have to get up and walk several hundred feet to get there, just so that you have to walk by other people. But this is something that transcends any job description in the office. Is you have the ability to get up and get out and see what people are working on, no matter what level you are. If you're a draftsman, if you're an intern, if you are a project manager, if you're a designer, if you're a principal, but it doesn't happen. And that, to me, is really why I feel like studio culture is going away. We're being completely sucked in to the light, right? We can't not stare at these screens. Even in meetings, you're staring at a small screen.
Well, we'll think about your office.
I am.
Well, but try to think about everybody in your office and tell me how many people in your office aren't pretty much the entire day 100% dedicated to that screen.
Yeah.
I did a mental note of everybody in our office. everybody from top down is, stuck on a screen.
Yeah, we have very few people who aren't on a screen, and the people who aren't are the ones doing CA out in the field, or are not versed in the tools, and you kind of wonder, hey, I wonder if they're onto something here.
Well, I mean, honestly, because of the way that we have done our office, I mean, or at least the structure in our office is that the project manager will basically go all the way from design through construction administration,
right?
And of course, it's the early on when we're cranking out trace sketches and stuff like that you're just building up tons and tons of paper that's sketched all over. You've got that part. But to me, the second best part of the job is when I get out of the office and I'm out doing CA, because I'm away from the office, and I'm not staring at a screen. We joked about this, and I was telling you guys in a other podcast that I get ridicule from clients and contractors. Where's your iPad? Why don't you have an iPad? It'll make it so much easier for you to do to do an RFI response right now, or things like that.
Instant.
Like, I'm glad I don't have the iPad, because I can focus on walking around, looking at what needs to happen, make my little notes. Sure, sometimes I kind of wish that I could, say, I didn't give you that RFI. Well, and then whip one out real quick. I'd love to be able to do that. But for the most part, though, I actually like being detached and unplugged.
Well, go ahead, Neil.
To be fair, Cormac, when we did things by hand, we were still staring at a table all day. I think that table's now just come off of the board and stands up and is a screen. Now, obviously, that screen has got a whole lot more going on there. So, it can be far more distracting. But back, when we drafted, it was the same. I mean, it was similar in that we just stared at a table all day long.
But as Evan was saying, is that you had the opportunity for other people to come by and see it. I mean, I've come by and, people are zooming in and out, and you really can't focus in on what they're working on to really engage them in some conversation that's specific to something that you saw. You say, oh, wait, go back, switch to this, that sheet or that layer, or do this or do that. You really don't do that anymore. You just like, oh, well, you walk past, in my capacity as project manager, I walk past them like, oh, good, they're working. It's not, ooh, what are you working on?
And one of the things that working in a little bit more of an analog world affords you is the ability to think about things, at least to have the excuse to want to think about things. And so, Cormac, like to your point where you were talking about not having an iPad, not being able to respond to that RFI in a moment's notice, you can actually think about what your response is going to be.
Right.
Make sure it's right, and then send it off. And that's when I feel like when I'm not on the instant schedule to turn around a design solution very quickly, my brain doesn't work that way. And I like to process things, and I like to think about things for a little bit. And that everybody's happier when I have the ability to do that, because there's real reasons for why I did things. And I think, you can get faster at that with experience, but you still need to be able to have things based on real thoughts and real circumstances and a real rationale, rather than, well, I played with these 5 different scenarios and I was in Grasshopper, and these are the 5 different algorithms that I used, and so these are our 5 different options. To me, that is very synthetic. It's very much fashion at that point, and it's not rooted in reality or real world constraints, maybe. And so you're not able to. I feel like if you're able to think about things like you were, like if something is on your drafting board for 3 days, and you're really thinking about it, and you're putting those lines down because they mean something, then the work means something to you. And if you have ownership over it, it's going to mean more to everybody on the team.
Actually, nowadays, if something's sitting on your drawing board for 3 days, somebody will walk by and say, you know what? Do it in the computer. It's a lot faster.
Yeah. What's taking so long?
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Well, going back to the whole studio environment, I'm curious about this because you mentioned, I think it was Evan, you said, it's becoming all cubes. And, one of the offices I worked in was very open, but it was designed at a time where everything was done by hand. And so we didn't have cubes. We had kind of built-in desks, essentially, which were all high, by the way. I mean, they were all up higher. We all
you sat on stools?
We sat on stools, exactly. And I think we all had like milk crates or something underneath our stools to put our feet on or something, or something built up so your feet weren't dangling all day long. But, I mean, what was nice about that was that that a lot of those types of conversations could happen because you were, just kind of walking around, your tables were all high. And so nobody was having to like bend over, lean over to, look at your drawings or to talk to you at all. I mean, we all just, we could stand up. And, I liked that environment. I thought that worked well. What was interesting is that when they came through and decided they were going to remodel and do some things, and they were going to lower all the desks, and they did. They lowered virtually all of them down, so that everybody could sit, and they're all concerned about carpal tunnel and making sure everything was done correctly, which was a great idea. But I find it ironic now that a lot of people like to work standing up, or at least have the option of going down, or maybe bringing their tables back up, to stand. So I think that, it's an interesting concept how that office was designed, how it was very open. It wasn't very cube based. I mean, there were a few walls here and there that kind of maybe went up to 8 feet tall. I think the ceiling was 9 or 10 or something. So some walls went up, and there were some offices with doors, for principals and things. But for the most part, the studio was pretty much open with a large planning table out in the middle, so that, general conversations could happen around a project, or people could sit around it and do design charrettes or something. And that worked really well because there was no cube environment at that time, in there.
Well, there's a couple of initiatives that have happened in the last few weeks in my area of the office where, because we do have cubicles and we have partitions that go up to about 5 feet, I would say. And the upper band of that, there's been a couple people who have started to remove their panels between them and their neighbor. So like we have several rows of cubes, and from me to my neighbor to the south, there's no upper band, but to my neighbor to the west, there is an upper band. Okay, so everybody in the row can see each other, but if you go to the next row, there's this 5-foot divide. And people have started to remove that upper band. And so that's one way that people have started to kind of defy the cube, right? And I know that there's going to be some people who are incompatible, where you're not going to want to remove the panel. But then there are people who are compatible. And it makes a huge difference for those people to have a conversation. So that's one thing that's happened that is a cool idea that's spreading. As people are starting to remove these panels, you can see the idea actually spreading. And there's some people who are freaked out by this. They think, well, we've got to put these back. And there's other people who are saying, it's too late. You can't put them back now. If you put them back now, you're going to kill morale, right? Like morale isn't low enough. So that's I think a key to, again, kind of working in the studio is being able to see and talk to all the people around you, just like you were talking about, Cormac. When you want to get someone's idea, you want to get a fresh set of eyeballs on the thing that you're working on, you can look to your left and say, hey, look at this. What do you think? And I think that's a big deal.
And funny that you say that because me and my adjacent cube mate, he's one of the other project managers, and we kind of reconfigured it where we basically have like a little vestibule that comes into a little small area, and you split off to one way or the other, so it almost feels like a little office. But now I feel even more isolated, where I at least, could kind of like move my chair back a little bit and kind of look to my left and, see some of my team members and, be able to like have eye contact with them. Now I can't even do that. It was, in a way, it was kind of more, I did it because everybody who walked past my cube kind of was, always peeking in, and not that, I was doing anything top secret or anything. It just kind of, my phobia of people just like hovering over the back of me, I like to have eye contact.
Yeah.
But, when
a lot of people in our office have little convex mirrors on the corner of their monitor so they can see when people are approaching, because they are so sucked into what they're working on. They want to make sure that they know when someone's coming.
Something that you said about morale, we're talking about, like basically this cube farm, and, we're talking about the headphones and, this constant detachment from, even within a project where we're becoming so detached that, I sit there and I watch morale just kind of dwindle to, it kind of gets sucked into this little black hole of, and, goes away. And I'm just, the conversations that, think about how much fun you had in studio when you were in school. Everybody was always talking. I mean, maybe you guys were playing music that, that had, whatever. I mean, you're playing music. You may not like the music or something, but everybody's just kind of like throwing music into it, and you're just having fun with it, and you're talking and you're interacting, and your morale was probably the highest. I would probably say all three of us, our morale might have been the highest when we were in school, when we were in an open environment like that.
Yeah. Well, and that forces you to play well with others, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in control of your own playlist and what's going on your screen, and you've got the headphones in, plugged in as deep as they'll go, it becomes very selfish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you said, you're disconnected.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
well, I had an experience back when I was first working in a larger office, where getting to the headphone thing. I think I had my headphones on one day, and I think it's somebody. I thought I heard somebody yelling at me or something, and it was the project manager I was working for trying to get my attention about something. And so, recommendation out there for all of you students or young interns working out there: leave them off. Don't wear them, because also too, and I don't know if we've mentioned this on a prior podcast, but there's a lot you can learn by keeping your headphones out and just listening to the if you're in an environment that's not the cube farm that we've been talking about, but say in an office where you can hear your coworkers or your project managers or the principals of the firm. And you can hear those conversations they're having on the phone. There's a lot of valuable information that you can glean by just listening. And so, I mean, your brain's focused on what you're doing. And sometimes I agree. I mean, sometimes guys, I gotta put the headphones on to just focus for a few hours.
Sure.
And that may just happen.
Right.
But the other times, when that's not happening, of course, as I became a project manager, that happened less and less because I wasn't, drafting all the time. But you just listen to what other people are saying around you, and you can learn some techniques about how to handle clients on the phone and or talk to consultants. And I mean, those are the things that you don't get direct experience with until you start doing it. But if you're listening to what's happening around you, you can gain a lot of valuable information.
That's absolutely true. And one of the other things that in our studio that was a challenge that was put out by the CEO actually was, give up email for a week as much as possible. If there's somebody in this office that you are going to reply to or send a message to, get up and walk over to their desk and talk to them instead of sending them an email. Just give it a try and see how it goes. And the whole idea is for you to get up and see what other people are working on. And I thought, it's hard to break people, especially the younger generation, of the whole instant messaging. So much of our life is spent communicating digitally that it's hard to break that habit. And a week isn't probably enough to do that. And you probably need a reminder more often than just that once. But for the people that really took it to heart, it was a very enjoyable thing. And, people got to see faces that they don't normally get to see and interact with. And there's so many times when a conversation face-to-face or over the phone is so much more productive because you can ascertain intonation and inflection and speech. And, it's really hard to judge somebody's demeanor in text. And so I feel like it's so much faster and easier to do it either in person or over the phone that it was very successful in that way. And it's so funny that we have to be reminded to do that,
Yeah, I've made a pact with myself that I don't send interoffice emails. I get up and go talk to the person. It just makes one, it's a small office, it's 22 people, and it just makes perfect sense that if you want to get it done quickly, just get up and go talk to the person because, they may not look at their email, or this, that, or the other. So, it just makes no sense. Plus, 9 times out of 10, my sarcasm is never read the way that it's intended to. And, I just sound like an ass. So I just avoid, interoffice emails.
You?
No.
Well, the same could be said for, communication with your consultants as well. I mean, sometimes it's just easier to pick up the phone and call that person and get something straightened out.
Well, that's a lot easier way to make sure it actually happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because you're talking to them. They can't ignore the email or have it get stuck in spam or deleted, That's a big deal a lot of times when you're on a tight deadline.
I go through, I get RFI logs and submittal logs each week from the contractors or construction managers. And, they send me things that, and I'm looking on their list, and it's something that I knew I emailed it to them, ages ago that, I didn't see that email, or, and, it gets rectified pretty quickly when I pick up the phone and say, hey, I was going through the log and, this, and this are still showing up on the log, but I sent it to you last week. And like, okay, well, let me check that out and make sure I've got it.
Let me dig that out of my 3 million emails that I received last week.
Exactly. And, it's just, it's becoming, as convenient as email is, especially to be able to kind of keep them, archived so that later on down the road, if you need that CYA kind of email that says, see, I sent it here, but that doesn't necessarily mean they read it or they got it or they, processed that particular, PDF that you attach to it or something. But it seems to, email makes it too easy to kind of detach yourself from your project.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the studio environment, we work with so many consultants on these projects, these large scale projects, that there's so many times when we send out a Revit model and we expect people to see where that duct chase is.
Right.
And guess what? Right. They have no clue that it's there. And so today, I called the mechanical on last week and I said, I need you in my office on Monday morning, first thing, so that we can go over what I'm thinking, so that it's going to make your job easier, and you're not going to put the unit on the roof where it cannot go. Let's save some time. Let's get together face to face and let's talk this through. And it made such a huge difference, right? Because now he's hitting the ground running, and he's going to come back to me with some usable design versus what he would have come back with, which he did come back with already, where it was like the units are completely in the wrong spots on the roof.
Well, Evan, since you're the one who works in the larger office, and we're talking about the studio environment, what do you think is maybe more of an ideal studio work environment? Yeah,
I was going to say we should definitely talk about what are the key ingredients, right, to the ideal studio environment. At least what I think is the ideal. Number one on the list is it's got to be a place, and we already touched on this, where you can have fun. If we're not enjoying our work, then we're going to leave every day kind of disgruntled, and we're not going to want to be there the next day.
Oh, yeah.
And so what are the things that make it fun? For me, it's music. You've got to be able to own your space. You've got to be able to do what you want with your space. So whether that's putting things up on your walls or putting things up on community walls and bringing things in that interest you and sharing those, it's like show and tell, right? You want to be able to have a place where you can put stuff up on the wall and listen to what you want to listen to, and have a safe, fun environment where you can put things out there that aren't going to be shut down and ridiculed and thrown back at you, but are things that can invoke conversations and discussions about whatever topic it is, and just create kind of for me, it's kind of a messy environment. I like it. I like the studio to not feel very corporate. So that's where the music comes in, and that's where the model making supplies come in, and just, lots of trace and wads of paper because you've gone through ideas. It's a very process driven environment. It's not concerned with being pristine.
Cormac, how do you think that works in a smaller office, though, where, say, the work environment, the studio part of the office, may not be kind of down the hall and around the corner, where you can kind of make it maybe if it is more personal and messier and whatever it is. But I mean, what if that office is maybe a little more open to the public, or maybe that workspace? I don't know. I've never seen your workspace, your office, but how would that work in a smaller place?
Well, I mean, it could, and in a way, it should, because much like what we do with this podcast, I mean, we're trying to expose people to, the layman that's not, strapped to the, cubicle farm like we are. I don't want to make it sound that bad, because it really isn't.
It's the Matrix.
Exactly.
You're plugged in.
But you want people to kind of see the grittier side of architecture, to understand that there isn't, we don't just have, as we said in the last one, that easy button where you can just click it and you get these beautiful renderings and these, beautiful, construction documents and stuff. That there actually is a hard process that, you go through to get from point A to point B. And it's not clean. It's not pristine. Things don't mount themselves. It just, that you get a chance to actually see that. And I remember when we were in school, we went on a tour of some firms in Atlanta, Georgia. We weren't too far, Auburn's not too far from Atlanta, Georgia. So we went to the big city, and we toured some of them big fancy architecture firms. And we just we went to one, I believe it was a TVS, that they're a huge corporate firm, and you walk in there and everything was aligned. I mean, books were color coordinated, and it just looked clean and pristine. And I don't think you were allowed to throw anything away. And it was interesting enough that it actually translated to the work that they did. It was very, it was really good architecture, but it was very corporate. It felt too clean, too sterile, too corporate. And then, I went into a smaller firm, but internationally recognized firm, and they're known for kind of like the Southern style of the deconstructivist at the time, very, very kind of avant-garde modern. And we walk into the firm, and it's a big, huge open warehouse, spray painted black concrete floors. You walk in and you kind of walk down the hallway, and there's like several hand-built models of all the different projects that they're working on. You walk into, they brought us into their conference room. It was, open. It had a couple of window, glass partitions, but it wasn't all the way to the ceiling. So, it wasn't like a private room. And the partner comes in, and he's got, he's wearing blue jeans. Now, this is a guy who's giving a tour to a bunch of prospective architecture students. So, you'd think that you'd either dress the part of the, architect in black, or you just, be yourself. And so this guy, was himself. Came out, t-shirt, jeans. You could see his toe hanging out of his Converse. And, he just enjoyed the environment. He enjoyed what he did. And it translated to his work. It translated to the, to the environment, and everybody was just rocking out to, to the music and everything. And I know friends who've now, now this was, back when they were still doing a lot of things by hand, and now everything's evolved to the computer. But I've been to the studio since then, since the, plug of the computer. And it's still the same way, it's still fun. So I think, back to the question, and it's an extraordinarily long way to get there, but back to the question is that, yeah, I think that people should see the dirty side of architecture.
Yeah. I'm so happy to hear you say that. I couldn't agree more. It is not something that should be hidden behind a wall or around a corner, because it is not apparent. The work is not out in the open. People aren't talking about it. It's not up on the walls except for the final renderings,
right?
Which those are poison. We've gotten so used to looking at these perfect glossy images that they're throwaway. They don't even mean anything anymore, right? Because it's this perfect, completely abstract or highly realistic, kind of distorted view of the project that's supposed to tell a story, and it doesn't do any of that.
Well, how much of that is the fault, if you will, of the owners of the firm? I mean, how does that? I mean, the owners of the firm. It sounds like, Cormac, in your example. I mean, the guy came out with the Converse shoes and jeans and a T-shirt. And I think the firm sounds like it reflected his personality. And Evan, in your case, sounds like, and I don't know this, but I mean, it just sounds like the vision of the firm is completely different, and it is reflected in the space that you occupy.
Yeah, you're right on. And to me, it's the difference between leadership and management. We are being managed, and we're not being led by somebody with a vision. And the person that Cormac's talking about is the leader, right? They ooze it.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody wants to follow it because they know where they're going, and they know what their leadership stands for, and they know what they think about architecture, right? Because that leader is passionate about architecture. And I think there is a big difference there.
Are you guys familiar with Brian McKay Lyons?
No.
He's an architect out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's been to Auburn, several times when I was still there, kind of as a visiting professor or a visiting critic. And you go to his website, and I believe it's now McKay Lyons, Sweet Apple or Sweet Apple McKay Lyons architects. And they show pictures of their studio and stuff, and it's this big, huge, long table. Wide, like super wide table, got to be like 60, 80 inches wide. People sit on either side of the table, so it's almost like you're sitting at enormous dinner table. And that they've got like little wings off of the table that, you've got your computer on, but then you can turn back to like the body of the table and look across the table at, the person that's sitting across from you and have a conversation. And it's like you're sitting at the dinner table, having conversations with your friends and family, popping open a glass of, a bottle of wine and just conversing about it. And when you look at his work, it reflects this nature that he really actually is passionate about it, and so is everybody else in his office. Because it's fantastic work. He's one of my favorites. Just it was just something about the modernism that he kind of practices, and he's got some interesting kind of like side projects that he does with the or studios that he does with the local architecture school called the Ghost Studio, which is just phenomenal because it's very similar to the what they do at the rural studio, but this is a little bit more temporary, so it's more exploratory. But the point I'm making is that I guess it's, what's reflected in the work is kind of what's reflected in the studio environment.
Well, have you guys even you probably have noticed it at Starbucks even. They're starting to go away from individual tables, and they are putting these communal tables into the middle of the spaces. And, they've got power strips down the middle, and everybody sits there, and they face each other, and you've got to make room for somebody when they show up. And it creates more of a community space. And I have to believe that that's because the coffee shop got too boring.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so they're trying to reinvigorate it and make it feel like a coffee shop again, where people hang out and they do things and they get together in groups, small groups, and they study together. And there's this activity, this vibrancy that's brought into the space when that happens. And yeah, it sells more coffee. But those people want to go hang out there because they've got that space.
Well, let me ask you this. And okay, we're talking about studio environment and, the kind of it becoming a little bit more like an individualized area that, people are in their own little worlds. How does that translate? Because you and I do schools and in civic environments like that we are infusing so much technology into these schools. Are we, how do you guys deal with perpetuating basically the same thing that we do in our own studios, where we're kind of like the self-guided education, you plug into your little computer and you go. It's interesting that more and more there was this big bum rush to get everybody all of the latest technology that now they're like, ooh, let's step back a little bit. And now they're actually starting to put in, just like Starbucks, these communal areas where you've got like, it's almost like, in one project that I did, you walk in and there's like this kind of like a little amphitheater right as you walk in there where, kids are hanging out, they're sitting there chit-chatting and talking and stuff. And then later, once everybody goes to their class, teachers will come out and use the space as teaching space so that, and then as classes let out, other, people go past this and they see what's going on and they start to interact with it. And I think the trend that we've been talking about is that when you offer the opportunities to be more open and more, aware of your environment, that the morale and the camaraderie kind of like, start to increase. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, on projects that I've worked on, especially lately, there's definitely a desire to have these pull-out spaces and these larger, like even on a high school, we're doing like a student union, which is unheard of, right? That's a college level kind of a space, but it's flexible. It's got movable furniture. It's something that will flex depending on the needs of the school, depending on what month it is. And then classrooms are all situated around a pull-out space where they can get out of their classroom environment and into another one with a small group. And just being able to do a change of scenery in the middle of a class can amplify a project that you're working on because you're changing scale, just in the amount of people you're working with, the environment you're working with. And I think that kind of thing is super important in our studios as well. I know a lot of people who will just take a laptop and go to a coffee shop and work to get some things done, or they'll go onto one of our communal tables that we have that, it's just standing room only, and you pull a laptop up there and work on it if you want to be infused into a different environment. I think that kind of stuff is the key to flexible working environments, with mobile computing, especially because things are all on the computer. If you've got a strong Wi-Fi network in a community space that's flexible where people can change environment, I think that kind of stuff is great for the working environment. And I'm kind of fired up right now just thinking about all this stuff of things that I want to do to get architecture reinvigorated into our studio because of all the symptoms that I talked about earlier and the ones that you guys brought up. I mean, I see that stuff every day, and it's kind of depressing to see where the industry's going with this, because I know we're not alone in my office, but that's where I have a little bit of pull and the ability to try to change that.
Well, I was going to bring up, you guys were talking about schools and how that changes maybe the way we think about how we educate people. And we touched on this a little bit last week too, or in the last episode. But are you guys familiar with the Energy Lab at the Hawaii Preparatory Academy?
No.
Oh, okay. It's a marvelous project. It's we'll have links to it in the show notes, but I highly encourage everyone to check it out. What you were just talking about, having flexible spaces, tables or things that can move around, and that's not the sole focus of this particular project. It's very much focused on, being energy efficient and net zero energy. And there's a whole lot of interesting technology that's gone into this. But what I find what's relevant really to our conversation is how that basically they're studios, and they're all these little individual studios that can change shapes and change the educating environment around to the need of whatever teacher's using that space. And that kind of goes to, I think, the studio environment. If we have spaces that can maybe move and change, and right now, many of us, or many people might have, the desktop computer and it's sitting there, but, a lot of people work on laptops or can, and, maybe something is to have that studio environment in an office that can be changed. I know one of the things going back to schools, in my son's second grade classroom this past year, one of the interesting things his teacher did to kind of keep things fresh, and this goes back to the Starbucks idea, is all their desks, the teacher would move them around every month or so and would reconfigure the desks into a different shape. The kids would get moved around, so they'd have somebody new sitting next to them, and it just changed up their environment. They didn't walk in. My memory of grade school was you walked into a classroom and there was 8 or 10 rows across, and they went back 10 rows deep or something, or maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it wasn't that many, but that was it. Those desks stayed there. They never moved, and you sat in row 3, 5 rows back, and you never moved. And that was a very different learning environment than what I saw volunteering in my son's class, where the desks moved around, the people moved around along with that. And it energized the environment. And maybe that's
kind of creates some anticipation, right, of what's next.
Sure. And it also gives an opportunity to, instead of that kid that sits across the room from you, that you never talk to maybe,
right.
Now they're sitting next to you, or they're close to you. And, there's that ability to, this goes back to the very beginning, or maybe what the ideal studio environment is that ability to engage in these different conversations that, if that person's sitting down the hall in their cubicle and you never see them except at, the Friday afternoon social or, whatever event that the company's having, then you never talk to them.
Yeah. And,
that you may find out they're a real cool person and you enjoy talking to them, or, you might be, a good pair, to work on a team together, but you may never discover that. And, anyway, so I'm kind of going off on a few different things, but I think it's all tied into how do we make our studio environments much more engaging and interactive. And I think we see examples of this in grade school classrooms and in this example with this, this Hawaii Preparatory Academy project.
Well, let's wrap this up. And the last thing that maybe we can each talk a little bit about is one thing that I guess I wanted to just say was one of the wonderful things of being so digitally connected that has transformed the studio for the better, I believe, is that now each one of us kind of has this ability to have a much bigger audience. And we're able to share what we're working on with as many people as we have access to, which is pretty much unlimited. For anyone that wants to see it, we can. That's one of my favorite things about kind of the new studios that we're working in is, I like to take a screenshot or a rendering or a model or take a picture of a sketch on my phone and upload it to Flickr or post it to my blog and just put it out there. That's one of my favorite things to do is just to share kind of the behind the scenes, like what we do here at this podcast. But I like to do that visually as well. I think that's just one of the coolest things about the age of the studio that we're in. What about you guys?
Oh, Evan, that's so true. I was recently, a few weeks ago, designing some tract houses. And we like to call them production homes, but here or there. But I did kind of one, and I didn't design the plans or anything. I'm just trying to elevate these things per the style that the client was looking for. And what was interesting is I took a picture of it and I just kind of threw it out there on Twitter. And the comments I got back were just amazing. Some people are like, what the hell is that? And, this garage is taking up 3/4 of the front. It's like, yeah, I can't change that, guys. Sorry. But, there's certain realities here. But it was quite fascinating how I could get feedback so quickly. And, not all necessarily positive, but then other people going, hey, that, for what it is, it's nice and it looks good.
Well, and that's what critique is. I think that's another topic, but yeah, you're not looking for positive feedback. You're looking for constructive feedback.
Exactly. And I wasn't actually really even looking for any particular feedback, positive or negative. It was just but throwing it out there. But that goes to what you were just saying, Evan. You can throw that out there and you can get some feedback, or not get feedback, but it just, people will comment on it, hopefully, and you can learn something from that. And it's almost like extending the studio environment to the world.
Right.
Well, with down to like my 2-minute sketch, I post things out there all the time, not just to share and show off, what I can do, but also to, get the feedback and the critique and all that other stuff. And then, but it's also the opportunity to see what other people are doing and kind of get the, draw inspiration from what other people are doing. And, the opportunity that the digital age is now, kind of affording. It's just like, ooh, look, hey guys, come check this out. This person's doing this or that or something, and you're able to, kind of, maybe, like a lot of the things that you were talking about, Evan, about what you guys are doing in your office to kind of like, free yourself from the, cubicle farm and stuff like that, or, interesting ideas that, we could translate to other people, and, maybe they, start to kind of, so that's the good thing about the digital age and or at least the digital studio. So
yeah, it kind of gives everybody a platform, right, to share and to get that feedback. And I think that it allows us to, and one of the downfalls, I guess, of the next point I'm going to make is that a lot of times people just use it to show the good.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great platform to show what you're experimenting with and be willing to fail and fail publicly and not worry about that, because, you're up front, you're saying, we're experimenting with this. What do you think? And people will chime back in and say, you know what, that did not work for us and here's why, or you're on the right track and here's why. And I think that kind of open experimentation is not native to how a lot of architects think. A lot of architects, I feel, grown up in the traditional way of doing things, we tend to guard our dirty laundry very closely.
Yeah.
And we only share what is the very nicely dry cleaned, pressed fashion. When in fact, back to the, we shared this on Enoch's podcast and on Eric Bobro's podcast too. It's about seeing behind the curtain that people want to see, and I think that's a valuable lesson for everybody involved. They get to see the good with the bad, and they get to see the process and how it is just a very organic, messy thing that comes together, and it ends up creating this pretty cool thing if everybody is a dedicated partner in it.
Well, what that made me think about that we haven't really discussed, but just to touch on it briefly, what if you're working by yourself in a single environment, and you don't have the problem of the cube environment?
No, but you still have that platform.
Oh no, that's where I was going, is that you're so insulated. I mean, you don't have somebody right behind you or right behind that cube wall to even converse with, so now you're really locked in. And what I've found is that when I have been working on some design projects or doing some design, which hasn't been too frequent, but that's picking up lately. But what's nice about that is even if you're working analog, Cormac, like sometimes I prefer to do when I'm designing, is I can take a picture of, say, some sketches and throw them out there. I know I did this even last year.
You did it today.
Yeah, exactly.
I did do it today, actually.
And that was great because, you're able to share with and get comments and input and criticisms and, praise from all over the place. So you're not as insulated as you actually think you are.
Well, no, but for a lot of, sole practitioners, you really are until you put it out there. And I guess that's what I'm saying is you got to get that information or share that with the internet and with Twitter and Google Plus and all these other avenues, to get that feedback.
Well, and I think that's going to be a key to survival, right? Yeah. Is you've got to show people what you do. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the crowd.
So doesn't that go back to talking about our portfolios and our resumes and fun stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
You're showing people what you are or what you can do.
That's right.
Well, I think that's a good place to kind of finish up here on this one.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, if you have any questions or comments, you can always visit our website, or please visit the website at archispeakpodcast.com. And you can reach each of us at our individual Twitter accounts, or follow the main Archispeak Twitter account. And all of that you can find on the website. And then also visit our Facebook page and leave comments or questions And if you'd like the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. We appreciate it. It really helps the podcast.
And let me just throw this plea out to everybody. Please, please comment and let's have some dialogue going, because as we were just talking about, put yourself out there. We're putting ourselves out there, and that's the way we all learn. So please comment.
Yep, good or bad, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, we'll see you guys next week, all right?
Okay.
Bye.
See you guys.
I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. Archispeak, you can say I eat, breathe, erase my beat, my bass, chase the one thing.